right, we're back for another episode of the Bad Ideas podcast with Mr. Gabriel Spiller. Welcome.
Oh man, it's good to be here, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we have Aria Spiller here too to produce this show.
Yeah, Aria is she's our agent, our manager, our head of PR, maybe head of communications is a better way. So you might hear her interjecting every once in a while, giving me cues,
Yeah,
and making sure I'm staying on track in the background
awesome. Yeah, for the guests, Aria is feline and likes to walk across the camera field of vision. So if you're lucky enough to be watching this show, you might get to see her, especially if Gabriel steps out of line and says something
here.
not approved. Um, but on the fun and interesting side of things, so CEO and head of design for Food Forest AI. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so in its simplest sense, we basically created a place to find supply chain partners all across the food and beverage ecosystem. And so that could look like manufacturers, ingredient suppliers, equipment suppliers, laboratory testing, just about anything you could think of. It's really a place to easily find those folks, connect with them, and kind of manage that search process. That's really our focus. So we have that software piece that allows people to do that on their own. And then we also have the service where we basically do that for folks. And so we're really focused primarily on the B2B side. And I think one way to put it is we are really supporting most of the time folks that are already in the supply chain as opposed to folks trying to enter the supply chain. So, you get a lot of folks that are maybe on the startup side, and I think we have a different way of delivering value for them. And most of the time that looks like connecting them with consultants in our network and folks that offer like fractional operational or supply chain support. And that often is the best way to deliver value in those senses. But we work with people all across that landscape. And it's one of the most energizing spaces, I would say. It's probably, I think on the outside, nobody even knows the B2B.
Like, I don't even know. I know nothing about your industry. That's what I was going to ask. Like, break it down for us. What, in my uneducated head, when like Coca-Cola wants to make a drink, they like call the factory and they're like, make more drink. And, it gets shipped to Stop and Shop. But like, what are the pieces there? Like what goes into it?
It is such a rabbit hole. I think, to your point, I held the same belief as well. There's a brand, they grow their product, make their product, package their product in one place, and then send that to maybe the end customer or to the grocery store. And that's how it works. But it turns out in any one product, when you go to the grocery store, any one of those items on a shelf, there might be, 5 to 12 different companies involved in producing that product. That comes from the raw materials, the processing, the distribution, the formulation. There's so many aspects, the laboratory testing. There are so many players, and they're all, it's not a linear space, right? It's very much like a web of all these interacting and moving pieces. The challenge, though, is that it's one of those industries that kind of operates out of line of sight, right? Most people don't even know it exists. I know I didn't know it existed just a handful of years ago. And I think even in the industry, though, it's still a little fragmented, a little siloed. It's one of those places where it's not fully in the digital landscape, so to speak. And so you have this dynamic where there's just a real hodgepodge of resources. And oftentimes it's like people just operating out of their own personal Excel sheets that they built over the years, or using, Google to handle more complex things. And so it's a lot of relying on generalized tools or word of mouth. And that's where I think we're really excited to offer something very specialized. But I think what really excites me, though, is that it's such a powerful entry point into so many things. And to be specific, like I just see food as the most intimate relationship I have with my body and with the planet, right? It's like pretty remarkable how deep that rabbit hole can go. But then within the industry, it's also just like tons of super creative and generous people. So it's like food and beverage is super competitive and time intensive and cash intensive and just really cutthroat. But when you're actually interacting with people, my experience has been, at least, folks are extremely generous. They want to help, they want to support, they want to connect you with the right people. And there's not a lot of gatekeeping per se. They really want to connect and be there to support each other. And
Mhm.
I think that's one of the most special parts about the industry. And then, to zoom out even further, one thing that really energizes me is I feel like food systems as a whole is where some of the most leverage of this is going to sound a little crazy, but this is where I think some of the most leverage of being human on this planet exists. And so,
Hmm.
what I mean by that is we're all experiencing this really weird time where, like, we have AI emerging, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
technological infrastructure is like exponentially expanding and permeating kind of everything at a time where I would argue some of our human technology is at its weakest, right? Have, we don't have those same community strongholds and neighborhoods that we used to.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
all experiencing chronic stress and environmental, toxins or, issues, obesity, chronic illness. This is like happening across the board. And so all this human technology, like everybody's circadian rhythms are shot, all these things are out of whack at a time where AI is emerging. And I guess, that's like one aspect of, like, let alone climate change, let alone, geopolitical challenges. And ultimately, I think what I come back to is that food is one of the places where you can really connect with community, you
Yeah.
connect with place, you can connect with the magic of this planet. It's like pretty crazy that every time I eat, every single thing came from this planet. I mean, that sounds kind of obvious, right? But it's like, I think there's something kind of magical there that is just so easy to overlook.
It grounds you a little bit, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
I think we're recording this over Zoom from like a couple hundred miles away, and
Yeah.
it's nice to have things that remind us that like there is Earth underneath your feet and it's taking care of you.
Yeah.
And I think Aria approves. She came into the shot to let you know that you're on the right track.
Yeah. She was like, hold on, you're getting on a tangent. You got to get back on track.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's one of those things where I find food systems have so much leverage to kind of handle all these different aspects of, like, repairing that relationship with ourself and with community
Mm.
and with the planet. She's like, she's reminding me to get back to revenue. Basically, we have this dynamic where um, we support people looking for supply chain partners. And the truth is, those people just need to get the job done. And so I think we like to create efficiency, create capacity for them to take some of that search process or that burden off their hands, or just do it for them. But I think long term, what we want to do is make regional sustainable supply chains almost like a default. So you don't have to do
Mm.
an extra search to find who is operating within a 100-mile radius, who is, you know, basically giving me some optionality on price, but also maybe I can save on operational costs and logistics costs and, some of those emissions that are involved with just moving things around the planet. And I
Mm.
think COVID was a great example. Now, most recently with the tariff dynamic that's still unfolding, we see how fragile these supply chains are. And we're in
Mm.
this era where we're kind of like it feels like at like peak globalization. And I think that connects directly with this feeling of disconnectedness as like
Mm.
individuals with community and with maybe ourselves and our bodies and the planet. And I think that regionalizing or like re-regionalizing a little bit or giving the opportunity to do that
Yeah.
creates this slew of solutions and opportunities and resilience, really, like,
Yeah.
sort of where the inspiration for our name came from. Food forests are these interconnected things that have layers of relationship where everything is sharing nutrients and information back and forth, and ultimately is resilient in a way that, for example, like a monoculture or a homogenized dynamic just is not resilient. It's actually really vulnerable. And,
Hmm.
you know, that's more of like the long-term vibe for us, is making those
Yeah.
things super accessible without having to do any extra work. And so that's ultimately where we went ahead. But the reality is people just need to get things done and keep things moving. And that's what we're here to support.
Yeah. Let me see if I can kind of translate what I understood a little bit for those of us that are not in the
Yeah.
space.
Those,
Uh,
yeah,
and
I
what,
jumped around a
you know,
lot.
No, but whack me if I'm like veering a little bit. But I think it's really important, because you talked about peak globalization, which resonated a lot too. And I think like what made that happen, like different labor laws and rules internationally created a lot of fluff, that international companies could use to market their products and services here. And I think that created a dynamic where anyone who was online thought those were the only options. And it seems
Mm.
like what you guys are doing is coming into like a maybe like an older, less efficient, more cash and margin constrained market in the US that is ultra competitive because it's so damn expensive, and say, hey, like you can't compete on this level, but we'll give you a toolkit that'll allow you to do automatically. So like you're bringing the market back together. It's always here. It's just they don't know that these other players are available because it's so much cheaper to just deal with the international guys. Is that kind of what's
That is
happening?
definitely a huge piece. I think that
Yeah.
to put it in its plainest terms, we're really trying to build that visibility layer where you can actually just
Mm-hmm.
see what your options are. And I think what we find quite commonly is like somebody's like, oh yeah, I ended up working with this guy. He's only 5 miles away, but I met him across the country at a trade show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that happens quite frequently, I think. And beyond that, given how intense the time crunch and margin crunch that there is kind of at all times in this industry specifically, where you have perishable goods, et cetera, it's like nobody really has time to like, oh, I found somebody that can do the thing for this price point and meet these specifications. I don't really have time to go continue that search process and open up all these conversations and do all this outreach and manage that process. And that's essentially where we, I think, can deliver some of the most value is creating some of that optionality, some of that
Yeah.
visibility, and enable folks to kind of compete. To your point, like what we see kind of across the board in all industries, and then definitely in food, is like uh, a centralization and a
Yeah.
acquisition type of atmosphere where PE firms or just huge food companies and conglomerates just roll up a bunch of different companies, or just this is a little bit of tea here, but there's a company uh, on the baking side where they make bread.
Mhm.
They buy competitors, they buy small bakeries and mills, and they have it in their policies to not even liquidate and sell those assets, but just destroy them, because for them it's actually more, there's more incentive to destroy competition and destroy any entry point for competition than to create a more resilient and diversified food system.
Yeah. Well,
And
because
that
then you're
is
dependent. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
these are just dynamics that exist kind of in a lot of industries, but I think in food it
Yeah.
affects everyone. And I think that's one of the things that excites me the most, and where we honestly just see some of the most room to run, because it's just hard to navigate, and you can't really easily or quickly see who's in your region or who are some
Yeah.
other options that I could connect with today,
Yeah,
regarding a
I
certain.
was I was reading about that new farm policy that just passed, about the localized farm. Your timing is perfect. That's got to be like amazing. I bet you there's grant money for you guys too. I
Dude,
don't know if you're, yeah,
I'm not gonna lie, it's definitely something we've been looking at, and I think
yeah,
especially so we're here in PA, and there's a bunch of folks that have just been awarded a bunch of different grants, and so it's absolutely something we're looking at, because I think fundamentally um, we can fit a lot of those requirements and a lot of those goals, but that requires a nice bit of research and a nice bit of motion
planning.
on
Yeah,
our side, but definitely worth rolling our sleeves up and get into those weeds.
that's amazing. Well, super super disruptive idea. I feel like, there aren't enough people attacking these more mature markets.
Mm.
But as you guys have found, and I bet you it's the same thing. People just don't like change. So I bet you work with companies that are like, "Oh, he's always been my guy." So like, I don't know that there's another market. I'm
Yeah,
just dependent on this one thing. And then you guys are like, "Well, you push a button and now there's five." Makes
exactly.
a difference.
There's a ton of that. I think, you brought up farming. I think there's a very similar dynamic in food and beverage, especially in the
Mhm.
manufacturing sector, where you have,
Mhm.
family owned businesses that are, maybe the owners are like 50, 60 years old. The next generation doesn't want to take it over. And, you have all this farmland that's like, nobody really, all the younger generations are priced out. And nobody wants to take it on. And like a lot of the time, like we just don't know where a lot of that land is going to go. Same thing with these manufacturing facilities and plants. I
Mhm.
mean, when you zoom out, the amount of mills and, farms, all types of different facilities that have essentially gone out of business over the last 30, 50 years, it is quite astonishing how much we have kind of lost when it comes to that type of infrastructure here in the States. And I think that's something that truthfully, I feel like it's like a national security thing, right? Where,
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you.
and
We
yeah,
can't make
so
our own food. It's
yeah,
kind of an
exactly.
issue. It's an
Exactly.
issue.
So,
Yeah.
I could kind of go on for a long time about all the different things that really excite me. And I think I oftentimes have to come back. I have to kind of, center myself around like, okay, what do people actually want and need right now? Because, like I mentioned, people just need to get it done. They need, product on time and ready for production. And that's, a little more linear than like, oh yeah, but who else is in your watershed? So it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
where
I hear you.
we have big dreams, big aspirations, but we're really focused on just delivering value right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's a huge idea. I love disruptive stuff,
Thank
breaking
you,
into
man.
those markets. Um, what do you think? So for our show, we're gonna look at something crazy, hopefully disruptive, and see if we can turn it into something good. Does that sound good to you?
I would love that. I'm excited.
All right. So we're gonna do the opposite of what you just said. We're actually gonna like leave the practical talk and venture into some
Let's do
crazy
it.
bad ideas.
Yeah,
All right.
that's
Let's
kind of
see.
my it's kind of my natural state.
All right. Let's see what we got. So today, our bad idea is AI precision pulse tracker enhances shipment tracking accuracy with an AI that predicts the package arrival times to the second using all available public data. Marketed as pinpoint logistics perfection.
So this is kind of industry agnostic, right? This is just distribution and
It looks like it has a B2C angle, so like you
okay,
get your Amazon package shipped and it tells you
okay.
the second when it's going to get there. But due to my limited knowledge of how logistics work, this would be an insane liability to everyone involved in that supply chain, right?
I was just gonna say, I hope they got a super staffed customer support team because they're like,
Yeah.
this was supposed to be here 7 minutes ago. That's
Yeah. Nope.
the yeah, that's it's going to be a challenge. You mentioned the pulse piece. Was there anything
So
else?
the name of it was just the name of
Oh,
it
okay,
is
okay.
AI precision pulse tracker, and it's like a parcel
I
delivery
see. Well,
tracking thing.
it's funny because I've actually heard of a few folks doing similar things where they would kind of repurpose existing technology to achieve some of these outcomes. So,
Oh
like
yeah,
the Apple, what do they call it? The tags, where they're like those
yeah.
little
AirTag.
air tags, exactly. Dropping those in the shipments, and then
Hmm.
sharing that information with whoever who was
So
receiving
you
that.
track the AirTag. Interesting.
So I think you could maybe argue that could be extrapolated to then, give this like real time update of when what that ETA is. Um, I think part of me feels like, when I zoom out and I think about, maybe the reality of, in 5 to 10 years, we have these like autonomous delivery fleets and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It kind of fits where I guess you would, personally, I'm a huge public transportation advocate. I want to see more investment in that type of infrastructure, and I feel lucky growing up in Philadelphia, where we do have a really, for the most part, really solid public transit system. And I think when I think about that, like autonomous driving stuff, I almost imagine it meaning less cars on the road
Yeah.
and more public transit, and then more of those vehicles would probably just be these like delivery vehicles. Especially right now where we have, I can go on my phone and I'm like, boop, boop, boop. And now somebody's going to send me Thai food. It's like, we live in this crazy time where I think we're getting to the point where customers almost like expect that type of dynamic. Where it's like, I should know exactly where this thing is. I should know exactly what's going to arrive. Um, and I don't know how sustainable it actually is, or how healthy it
Well,
actually
yeah, I'm with you. We're setting expectations we can't hit. I think two things come to mind for this one. One, we actually did a show with the VP of engineering from Amazon who built their logistics platform,
is. Damn.
which was super cool. We got to talk all about parcel delivery for them. But like the math behind that business is unbelievable. Like the fact that they can move something to you in 2 days
No, it's
is an
crazy.
incredible feat of man.
And like bundle
But
it
it just
with deliveries, it's crazy.
but that's how it works. Like it deliberately crowdsources the fastest shipment angle for you. Um, but the second you get pinpoint precise, you can't do that because you're committing to a time.
Right.
So like when I look at this, it's like, yeah, if you could predict when it would get to the customer, that's great. But like every delivery beforehand, if it's a second off, screws you up and screws up all the ones before. And so like it'd be near impossible to control all the variables and how
Yeah.
this worked. So it's almost like the whole business is setting false expectations, which, as you know, it doesn't work very well for keeping customers happy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I guess who do you think that there is a a user or a potential customer for this business that it would work for?
well, here's my bigger question. From a tech standpoint, do you think AI could ever get to the point where it actually could predict when it's going to show up? Like where it could forecast for irregularities and be smart enough to like look at traffic in your area and say, they're going to get here within this time range.
There's a couple of interesting points here. It's like, and that's where I was kind of going with that, those like
Uh,
autonomous delivery vehicles, because it's like,
uh,
that would almost mean like they are the traffic. And so they would be able to determine like, all right, what does that congestion look like? But all of that would have to work with some kind of like crowd sourcing dynamic where you have these like mesh networks. This is really tangential, but I think it's related. Jack Dorsey had just released
yeah,
a chat
yeah.
thing, which is really cool, and it's also using the like mesh Bluetooth network. So it's just like, it makes me think we're going to see more and more technology and innovation that's relying on, like, that's how the AirTags work, is they're relying on all of the iPhones, and they bounce between the iPhone networks. And
Mhm.
in essence, it's sort of like Uber was only able to exist because we all had GPS in our phones, right?
Mhm.
Otherwise it would have just been, kind of, their idea might have been on this podcast, right?
Hey, yeah, yeah.
We didn't have that. And so I think I would bet we're going to continue to see that type of innovation where folks are just
Yeah.
leveraging the existing infrastructure that's like an outcome of the technology we all use. And so I wonder, I guess I almost feel
That
like,
you just solved it for me. So you're talking about air tags, and Tesla popped into my head, and you're talking about the autonomous vehicles. Do you think that this is a question for you? Do you think that's Musk's real game plan? Like now we have the autonomous vehicles. He's turning on Robo Taxi in 4 months, so you can like rent your car when you're not using it. And then they're rolling out Optimus. Like, are the cars going to be doing deliveries and like the Optimus going out and like pulling packages off for people? And it's just this interconnected economy of Tesla technology.
dude, I think that it is very hard to, from the just like average perspective, I think it's hard to connect those dots. But I think that it's more so, what I mean is, I think it's hard to understand how much everything changes when we have
Yeah.
automated, one of the ways that I think is one of the most interesting ways to look at it is like humanoids like Optimus, and just AI technology with like specifically AI agents. are essentially like new species, and they're going to be continuing to populate kind of in mass and like be reproduced in pretty transformative ways that I think it's making it kind of hard to predict what those outcomes are. But I think what you can foresee, as you're alluding to, is like how they begin to work together. I think the craziest thing I heard was looking at all of Elon's, and he's obviously a very controversial person, but um, looking at all of his businesses and how they actually parlay into really essential infrastructure
Mars.
for
Yeah,
Mars,
yeah, yeah,
right? Where
yeah.
you basically send all these robots there to use the technology of the Boring Company to build these underground tunnel complexes and using automobiles that are powered by the sun and, all these different things where it's like, I guess that makes sense. I think
Uh,
part of me, one thing that I have struggled with, I think, in these past couple of years is like, I guess the way I looked at it is like uh, I'm a 21st century human with 20th century values. So I like can appreciate the hard work. I kind of want to do things the manual way or the like human way, but in the reality, especially in business, like I have to adopt these new um, kind of like standards of like how fast something should take or like what the path to get there should be. And I think that really ultimately in this new century, like we're going to be asked like, what does it mean to be human? And I think the one, this is kind of like a joke that I have, but it's like my grandkids are not going to be accountants. They're going
or
to be
lawyers.
humans
Yeah, yeah.
and that might be their job. And so it's like, I wonder if our job is to just be humans for each other, right? Where it's like just being in communication and in conversation, or more
Yeah.
so in community and in conversation, and like learning how to interface with each other and self regulate in new ways, where like so much of the past, like a couple thousand years, has been about like, okay, how do we just survive?
Yeah.
And I think I don't know. I think that's kind of changing. I mean, obviously, we're in this like very crazy time where everything is being reimagined,
Mhm.
and nothing is guaranteed. And like, there's like the whole poly crisis or meta crisis of all these different aspects. And so, I think in some ways it's hard to ask these big questions,
Yeah.
but it is exciting to think about.
Yeah, and to be a part of it, I think that bringing it back to your business, like in the middle of food and beverage, something super tangential, or what tangential? What's the word I'm looking for? Direct, on the nose. Everyone eats.
Yeah,
Um, like you're. It's almost a similar solve to our bed idea. Like you're creating data visibility, so companies can improve their supply chain in a really efficient way. I mean, does that have an impact on speed? Like if you guys are able to connect them with better vendors so they can save or accelerate like their production process, like does that change the way the market actually consumes? Do you think?
it's a really good question. Something that we're definitely asking. I think there's two ways I look at that, and I think one is yes, where it's like I think one of the biggest issues is like just how long and how arduous the search process is typically
Mm-hmm.
when you have all these fragmented resources or partial resources or people that don't even have a website but are doing 80 million in revenue. It's like
I know.
it's crazy. It's crazy what
Yeah.
you get in some of these pockets of the B2B food and beverage world. But I think just giving people that visibility, I do think we're able to take that search process and like exponentially shrink it down to something you can do in minutes instead of months. And I think that's going to be transformative in its own right, just allowing people to see, okay, I can, all right, I found somebody today that I needed to talk to that I'm going to buy this ingredient from, but I heard back 3 days later from somebody that has a much better price point and is closer by, and that's going to be my long-term supplier. But I think one of the biggest things, especially in food, is having what you call backups for your backups. And I think there's a lot of that missing in the industry today where people don't have that optionality or that resilience. And I think it's a mix of being able to not only save money by finding things faster, but also and like having price optionality, but also being resilient to disruptions where it's like, oh damn, this is oh my shipment is stuck in the Suez Canal for months now. Like what? How do I adapt to that? And having some optionality is a big piece at the ready. But I think the other way that I look at it is and I think I'm still parsing through whether or not this is a want versus this being the reality of where things are headed. I do believe this is where things are headed, but whether or not that actually manifests is out of my hands. But um, coming back to that regional piece, I think people operating from that lens of understanding, okay, essentially like what materials are in my region already, and coming to the product development phase from that perspective. So, oh, these are all the raw materials that are readily available or affordable in my region, and that's how I'm gonna. How can I use these creatively to create my product? So, if I'm in Vermont and I'm using some imported stevia extract for my sweetener in this product, maybe I should be using maple sugar because I can get it from this guy 10 miles down the road. And yeah, maybe it's going to have a different kind of macro outcome where it's an actual sweetener. But this is another tangent. I think that's where we are headed, just towards more natural, real food ingredients in general. You could argue stevia is, but I'm I'm a little in the weeds there. But my point being is like by surfacing all that information automatically for people, I think it fundamentally changes how people think about product development in general and the products that they're building. And so I think on one hand, I think it could be cheaper and I think it could potentially be transformative from the lens of like, how am I creating my product and how am I going to compete? And I think ultimately, if they can, I think people want to support their region or like their things that were sourced or produced locally. And I think being able to tell that story is going to only become more important over time. Personally, that's what I think, and I feel like that could be a real differentiator for companies long term.
Yeah, I mean, optionality always makes things more efficient. So it's kind of like the question answers itself. All right. Well, so it's interesting. Like you actually have a business that's kind of not promising something it can't deliver, but solving the problem this attempts to solve
In a
from
way,
the
yeah.
other end by creating other paths there.
Yeah.
Um, so what's your verdict on this one though? So from somebody who's kind of in a related space, do you think there's any legs on building some real time AI predictive delivery tracker?
And
Or do
I
you think
think
it's a little
this
too far ahead?
I think the question I keep getting hung up on is like, who is that customer, right? Like, who is willing, who
Mm-hmm.
wants that or needs that? And I think maybe what comes up is almost like medical use cases where, like, okay, somebody needs this heart or
Ah,
something that's being transported, or this like medical device that is really necessary, or maybe like I don't really know anything about nuclear science, but like maybe somebody needs uh, this piece of equipment or this component to fix this machine
mm-hmm.
in a certain time. I could see some of those more time intensive instances, people maybe wanting to pay for that type of certainty. Um, so I think it's hard for me to say it's got legs, but I think if somebody was able to really paint that picture of like, okay, this is the customer that actually needs that certainty because it's going to then determine all of these other factors, or like if this person successfully gets this lung transplant or not,
Ah.
I could see it having some legs. I think
So it's like a super premium product for people.
yeah,
Like they need to know, so they're not using standard shipping logistics. They're not like trying to crowdsource the lowest
right,
price. They're trying to
right,
like know that this thing is
right.
coming.
It's not like I would love to have that new GoPro today instead of tomorrow, but really
Yeah.
no, I would actually need this inhaler today or like in the next hour or something like that. And I'm
Yeah.
best example, but I have heard of instances of like medical equipment or prescription drugs having their own delivery dynamic. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's like kind of a just emerging category where like people aren't necessarily. operating through those centralized medical institutions, and they're like going right to providers or do some other kind of
Yeah.
private sector. And so I think I could potentially see it in those instances. Because I'm trying to think who needs to know exactly when this thing is arriving, like to the second. Um,
Yeah. But you're right. There is somebody who does. So maybe within that market, it isn't such a bad idea.
I think I would want to see a couple case studies before I invest, but I think
Yeah. All right.
I think
All
it's
right.
it is exciting to think about because we are in this time where like all of these different dynamics that have been so human centered are going to be uh, reevaluated. And I mean, just to kind of bring it back to food and beverage,
Yeah.
distribution is kind of like this elephant in the room where it is, once you start looking at it, it's kind of crazy. So like you have these huge conglomerate distributors that are handling the logistics of like bringing product from certain distribution centers to retailers or to other distribution centers and stuff like that. They take tremendous amounts of margin, and they really have the most linear job. Like it's literally A to B. When
Yeah.
so many other aspects of the supply chain are not linear.
It's a
And
gatekeeper business. It's a gatekeeper
yeah,
business. That's
it,
where the
it's
leverage is. Yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah, and I think nobody's. I guess I've been wondering how does that get transformed with these like autonomous vehicles and like kind of this new visibility into those that transit process, and who's doing it. It's going to be very. I would not be surprised if that's a side of the industry that gets heavily disrupted pretty soon.
Hmm. Interesting. All right. So there's optimizations for all of us, but we think for highly specialized, ultra high need, this actually might be a decent idea.
Yeah, yeah. I think
All right.
another one could maybe be all right. This is kind of crazy. All right, so I'm just we're riffing right now. So I'm on a
Yeah.
hike and or no, I'm a park ranger and I I'm a park ranger. I see somebody got bit by a rattlesnake. They they need to get this serum or whatever kind of solves that problem. Like I need to know that that's going to get there in under like 60 minutes or whatever it is. And so maybe that's like a delivery drone. I like push a button, send the longitude, latitude back to the HQ, and then they send the drone up. I
Mhm.
would need to know when that thing's going to arrive. It's
There
pretty
you
pretty
go. So
impressive.
emergency situation. So high urgency and
Yeah,
emergency.
yeah.
Maybe there's a premium market for it. And that in that case, if you're specialized, it's probably pretty easy to build the tech. So like
Mm-hmm.
it's just a single data stream. That's pretty easy. All right. All right. We fixed it. I think that gets my thumbs up.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
Food Forest, if people want to help or get in touch with you or find a new supplier, how do they connect?
Well, you could definitely find me on LinkedIn. Reach out
Mhm.
directly to me whenever. I'm always happy to just learn about people's businesses and what their needs might be. We do a lot of different things for folks in food and beverage supply chain, so it's always something we're always looking for new challenges and new opportunities there. And LinkedIn is one of the easiest ways to get a hold of me, or you can reach out right to me at Gabriel at foodforest.ai. If you go to foodforest.ai, you'll see we have just opened early access, and so you can also reach out to us there. But we've got a bunch of big announcements coming soon, so we'll be making a little bit more noise. But those would probably be the
All right.
best places to find us.
Awesome. We'll link out to you when we publish and shoot me a note when the announcements come out. We'll publish that stuff too.
I
Exciting
really
for
appreciate that, Nick. Thank you so much, man.
you. Yeah. Thanks for doing the show. You're an awesome guest, and thanks for the tangents. I feel like I learned a lot on this one. This was
Oh
cool.
yeah, awesome, man. Thank you so much for giving me the space, and I think it's really fun what you're doing. I think that it really it piqued my interest from the jump, and
Yeah.
so this is really a fun exercise and something I think is I don't know just gets all these different creative juices going, and I think it's just a fun time, man. So I appreciate you sending this off.
Yeah. Awesome. Glad to have you here.